Hey everyone, welcome to the Equal Value Podcast. My name is Lisa. I'm your host, and I'm also the founder of a nonprofit organization called Black, Brown, and Diverse Plant-Based People for Equity, Inc., also known as BBDPPE. You can find us at www.equalvalueforall.wordpress.com. And while you're there, you can hit anywhere you see a donate button, donate whatever you can. And that money goes directly to giving people in the community free food, as well as health and wellness information at about $30 per bag of food per person. I am a plant-based person who comes from a position of equity. So we talk about all kinds of things on this podcast, but it's from that perspective, just as a little introduction since we're new in all of these first few episodes. Today is our second episode, and I was interested in sharing some new tips for starting a nonprofit in 2023. Even though this podcast is separate from the organization, it is aligned with PBDPPE. And as we've been going along the journey and getting the nonprofit going, we've learned that some things have changed from the way nonprofits were started or run before. So currently, in 2023, especially with the state of the economy, one thing that's changed, this is the first thing, I'm going to give you 3 tips for starting a nonprofit now today. The first tip that I have is that anyone who's interested in starting a nonprofit organization and giving back to their community, or has some sort of goal in that way that they would like to accomplish, you do want to plan on getting and applying for grant funding. Before, when I started researching for starting this organization, was just after the pandemic. I think probably maybe late 2021 or 2022. And the information I was seeing was from like around 2020 and maybe even as early as like 2018. And at that time, I think there's a YouTube channel called Boss on a Budget where there's a nonprofit expert on there, and she gives a lot of good information. But she would say, do not rely on grant funding. I personally think that this has changed because of the state of the economy, because of inflation and things like that. You want to plan to be able to get that type of funding and as much of it as you can. So you want to learn about how to do it. You may want to learn about grant writing, but I think the processes have also changed. And a lot of processes are to the point now where you can just apply online. A lot of them are streamlined. And I think it's easier now than it has been in the past, probably simply due to the pandemic, where there are many more things now that you can do online that you may not have been able to do in the past. So you do want to plan on getting grant funding because people, individual donations, peer-to-peer donations, it's going to be harder to get those when people have less money to give. To be honest, in an economy where, prices are high, rent's going up, all those types of things, and they may not have as much money to give to charity as they have in the past. So you want to plan on getting grants. Number 2, you want to plan on getting your tax exempt status for your nonprofit organization as a way to get that funding more easily, because many private organizations, and especially government and federal grants, require you to have 501c3 status, which is the tax exempt status from the IRS. Because when you have that status, even if you are able to get something like a corporate donation, most people who will have the money to donate are going to want you to have that status so that they in turn get a credit on their taxes for donating to a tax exempt organization that has its status. So if you have tax exempt status, they get a credit on their taxes for donating to you. So it'll be easier for you to get those donations, not to mention the fact that the government, the federal grants, like I said, most of them, I believe, require that 501c3 status. and even some private organizations, although there are a few who will say, you don't necessarily have to have it, or you can get something called a fiscal sponsor, which means you look for a nonprofit organization who has tax exempt status, and they allow you to apply for grants through them. But I think sometimes those organizations are not always continually accepting organizations for fiscal sponsorships. So it's probably a better idea to try to work to get your tax exempt status, but it's also easier now. So that's my main point, which I'm getting to, which is that in 2023, it's a lot easier. I was told, like I said before, the research I was doing, I think even though 2020 seems not that long ago, some of that information is old. So I had been going through an organization that pairs, nonprofits with lawyers to help you get your tax exempt status, and with filing, and the lawyers that I was paired with. First of all, it took quite a bit of time to get paired with the lawyer. Then the lawyers that I was paired with from this law firm, which is a pretty well-known law firm, called Nixon Peabody LLP. I'm going to shout them out because I feel like a lot of the information they gave me was inaccurate, to be honest. And I could have saved a lot of time if I'd known that things have simply changed. The lawyers I was paired with, it's probably and possibly because they weren't the best match, but they were, they were going to have to consult with an outside person who specialized in, nonprofit tax law, because they did not. So it was making the process a little bit longer. They were, just giving me, tips and, recommendations that were unnecessary. So today, basically, to get your tax exempt status, the process is also streamlined now. You can do it online for the easy short form. There's a short form and there's a long form. So for organizations that are smaller, just starting out, you can do the short form as long as you have everything in order. You are registered as a charity, all your ducks in a row, you have an EIN number. With the IRS, you can simply go online, basically put in your information, they'll ask you for it, and boom, you're pretty much done. I mean, it's so simple that it's ridiculous. And so to me, actually now, part of the reason I'm doing this is because I'm kicking myself because I waited so long. Because I waited longer than I needed to, basically. But the one thing that you do want to remember that hasn't changed is when you file for your tax exempt status, you want to make sure that you identify yourself as a public charity, not a private charity, because because most nonprofit organizations are going to be designated as public charities. But if you identify yourself as a private charity, I believe that you'll be taxed differently, and it's a little bit more involved. So you may want to look up the difference between the two, but you just want to make sure that when you're applying, that you remember to do that, to name yourself as a public charity. And then the only thing you have to do is pay the filing fee, which is $275 for that short form. Now, when you go to the IRS website to apply online for the short form, the quick status, they'll tell you the eligibility criteria that you need to meet. One of them is that you expect to make, a certain amount per year. I mean, if you're going to be making, if you expect to make like $1 million with your nonprofit, then obviously you're going to need to fill out the longer form, which is a little bit more involved. But they'll have all of that there for you on the site. It's pretty easy to understand, straightforward, streamlined process. You do it online, do it yourself. You don't need to, get unnecessary recommendations from people who are not qualified to give them. And you can pretty much do it on your own. Another tip that I wanted to give is to remember that you only need to register your charity probably in one state. That's the advice that I've been given after, again, looking up that information and research that I think is kind of dated. I found that in the beginning, they used to tell you that you needed to register as a charity with the state in each state. So that means in each of the 50 states, even though I am based out of New York State, I would have had to register in pretty much almost every state as a charity in order to accept donations in those states. Because I think a lot of times, probably a long time ago, people used to mail people donation cards or envelopes and things you get in the mail. You want to be able to check within your state to be sure and say like, hey, is this a real charity? So you would have had to be registered, and there's a fee to register in every state, which could get a little pricey. There were companies who would do it for you. They would charge thousands of dollars, and so on and so forth. But so now with the internet, with these streamlined processes today, you do not have to do that. And I was kind of thinking that, after I registered in New York State as a charity, like, couldn't someone just, like, look at the New York State website? You can look it up there and see if someone is a registered charity. So it turns out I think that that's pretty accurate. Because in some of that information that I was looking at before, again, it was saying, again, not that old, 2020, 2018, prior to that, and some of that information was saying, you cannot accept donations online because you have to do this registration in every state, so it becomes tricky, blah, 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 yeah, yada, yada. But so I actually was on Jasmine Singer's Our Hen House podcast, and I mentioned this. I happened to mention this just in case people wanted to donate. I was like, we're not registered in every state, but if you're in New York, you can donate to us. And she said, no, that is antiquated, meaning that is a dated idea, which I was kind of thinking that, as I said, and I'm glad that she kind of confirmed that for me and said, basically what I'm telling you, like, so if I'm registered in New York State, I can accept donations from anywhere these days, and probably particularly online, because anyone online can look up the fact that I'm a charity in New York State. Anyway, so those are the three tips that I have for registering today in 2023, because I think things have changed, and not everyone who's had or run a nonprofit for a long time is always going to be aware that things are changing. So, number one, do plan to rely on grant funding. In my opinion, I think that's important because, like I said, the economy is not what it was, and you don't know what it will be going forward. Number two, to get that funding, you want to make sure you're filing for that tax exempt status, and it's way easier now, especially if you're new, smaller organization starting out. You can file that short, easy form online at the IRS website. All you have to just Google it, and you can find out how to do that. And third, remember that you only need to register your charity, most likely in the state that you're operating out of. Maybe some instances where you may need to register if you have like a super large donor in one other state or something, or wherever that donor was coming from, if they were giving you like hundreds of thousands of dollars or something. But generally, you're only going to need to probably register in your one state that you're based out of. You just want to be prepared to pay the filing fees for those things. It's not that much. I think the New York State filing fee to register to charity was something like $25. Again, if you're doing it in every state, it would add up, which is ridiculous. I can't believe they used to do that to begin with. But anyway, and the filing fee for the tax exempt status for that short form online is $275. So you would want to have at about $300 to be prepared to pay those filing fees. And then you'll be pretty much set, in my opinion, for the way things are changing, and you want to make sure you have the most current information and not always rely on what people are telling you, because like I said, it's constantly changing. So streamline processes. And speaking of filing fees, okay, you can see from the title of this episode, the second part of this episode is based on the fact that I think certain celebrities and politicians should do more to help people. And this is just based on things that I see and hear every day that we all do, a lot to do with news and things like that, because YouTube shows me things when it's on autoplay that it thinks I want to see. And I end up filing these things away and thinking like, okay, the same way that filing or that, doing these things for a nonprofit has changed, so has the way that we view poverty, inequity, and all of these things, unequal distribution of wealth in society. And so when I say people should do more, I mean, I think they need to recognize that things have changed. A lot of them are out of touch with this fact, and that they need to maybe change their approach. So when I say do more, I mean change the way you're thinking about this. So one item I saw a couple weeks ago was she's like a fashion designer. Her name's Aurora James. She was on the talk show The View, and so she told like this like engaging story about how she started this business, her fashion business, with like her last $3,500. She bought like a stall to sell things out of New York City. She was like on the verge of getting evicted from her apartment until Whoopi Goldberg wore a pair of her shoes like on the Tonight Show or something. Okay, so now fast forward, she's talking about how she started this actually a nonprofit, I think, where she gets organizations to pledge to put Black businesses on their shelves, this and that, like major stores and things like that. Okay, so that's helpful, we guess, here at the Equal Value Podcast, but you also have to think about this in terms of what you actually identified as being your problem to begin with. Because like I said before, things are changing. So before, it would have been okay to just say, let me help these Black businesses get on the stores, on the shelves in all of these stores, which is not a bad thing. But today, people don't even have the money to pay the fees to start a business. I mean, you're going to have to pay filing fees to start a nonprofit. You're going to have to pay filing fees to start a for-profit business. And she just spoke about how difficult it was for her to get started, how she was about to get evicted, how that was her last $3,500 in order to start this business. So in my opinion, that's where you begin. So you begin with helping people where you see where the issue is, because many times, and most often, in my opinion, people are treating the symptoms of the problem rather than the actual problem. Same with, a plant-based diet, where they're eating the things that your body is really meant to be taking in and digesting. Most things that go wrong with our health and our bodies are symptoms of a poor diet. Not all of them all the time, but largely. And that's why you can treat, manage, and some people even say reverse certain diseases and health problems simply with changing your diet. But so anyway, so having that in my mind, that's what I think she should change, the way that she's approaching it. So, which is something that we plan on doing with Black, Brown, and Diverse Plant-Based People for Equity, with giving microloans to people who need those startup costs met and need funding to start organizations, businesses, whatever they may want to do. So it's going to the main problem rather than just treating the symptoms. Because there are many people who have ideas, who would love to start their own businesses, be their own bosses, give back to their communities and nonprofits, but they don't have the funds to do it. They're like, okay, I had $300 for, filing fees and, whatever else I need. Say they may need $1,000. They're thinking to themselves, okay, how can I even, come up with that when I can't even pay, rent? You know what I mean? Which has also gone up now because of inflation. So, and people's, incomes have not increased accordingly, the same as those rents. Okay, so now moving on from that, so that's one issue in person who I think could take a different approach. I also saw an interview just yesterday with Jamal Bowman. Jamal Bowman is the congressman who had a recent run-in with Marjorie Taylor Greene. They kind of had a back and forth. He was on the radio show, The Breakfast Club, yesterday talking about reparations, which is an interesting topic. I actually agree with everything he was saying, which is that Black people in particular deserve reparations because there was no Reconstruction period after the Civil War. Basically, Abraham Lincoln had a plan, to put it simply. He was going to give 40 acres and a mule to every Black person. Spike Lee, the director of Spike Lee's organization called 40 Acres and a Mule. That's why he named it that is real. So he was going to instruct the land that was taken from the Southern owners to be given to now free Black people as part of Reconstruction to reconstruct their lives, the South economy, the United States as a whole. But when Lincoln was assassinated, the president who came in did not follow his plan. He instructed the Union generals, Union Army, to give back the land they had taken to the Southern owners. So Black people didn't get the 40 acres and a mule. One free slave was quoted as saying at the time, they didn't give us nothing but our freedom. So anyway, so I agree with that fact, the premise on why people deserve reparations, because Lincoln's plan did not come to fruition. The land was given back to those Southern former slave owners, and then the sharecropper system was born, where Black people ended up working that land for pennies and probably just, scraps of food, which then developed into the Jim Crow system of the South. So he is right in that context. Where I think he could approach this differently is when he also went on to say that the way to change it, so he mentions that he, Cori Bush, AOC, members of the squad have created a resolution in Congress that they would like to pass, which would ultimately develop into legislation. Resolution is a vision statement, which discusses, what they think should happen, how much money they need for reparations, so on and so forth. So some states have already done this, he said, which is true. California, they've been, putting together task forces to see how much it would cost, how much each person would deserve in the different localities to have to be paid reparations that Abraham Lincoln initially planned to do. So people are owed this. They do deserve this. They never received it. Point blank. Period. Aside from that, so he said that in order to get this passed, what people need to do is to put people in office in order to get them to have the votes to be able to pass this sort of legislation. Okay, well, so you're in Congress, you're sitting there, you have this resolution. Okay, get out and make it happen. The one person that I always have been impressed with is Stacey Abrams. Okay, I personally believe Stacey Abrams won the election for Joe Biden. She literally flipped Georgia. I mean, she didn't just try to, turn voters. She went down and registered new voters. So, which hopefully, if she's needed, she would be so kind to lend a hand again. We will see. But so they need to take the same approach. That was a different approach. And they can also take the approach of going to the places where people need it most. Go to those places where they would be most impacted by these elected officials. Because I do also agree that all politics is local. By these elected officials, promising is what I'm going to use, promising to do this for people, to give people reparations. At the very least, I would say people, of course, deserve something like universal basic income. So Jamal Bowman, the squad, everyone in Congress who has this resolution that's just sitting there, there's a list called the worst cities for Black Americans in the U.S. You can find it on our website, again, equalvalueforall.wordpress.com. And it's on the web page titled The Need. There's a link to that article. You could go to each one of those cities there and make it happen. Because what happens is people begin to just give lip service to something. You have all this sitting there, okay, it's waiting on you. You can sit there and tell people you need to do this, you need to vote. You go out and you make it happen. Same with Nina Turner. She's a politician from Ohio. She also did a Breakfast Club interview where she talked about She said, we need to be out here in the streets protesting about the things we don't like, protesting like the people in France, um, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we need to be doing that. Lead the way. Okay, tell us when and where to be, and we'll meet you there. Okay, so this is what I mean about people not just giving lip service to something, but making it happen. Um, Times have changed, and you need to start thinking about things more strategically if you really mean what you're saying. So using that list of the worst black states for African Americans is beginning to try to make a difference there. Would be a way to be strategic about what Mr. Bowman was speaking about in terms of reparations. Okay, then lastly, I happened upon this kind of old interview. It was a few months ago that Marlon Wayans did, and he was talking about how he went back. He grew up in a poor neighborhood in New York City, and he went back and he like rebuilt their gym in the projects he was from. He gave them a new gym. And it's like, okay. So we're talking about Marlon Wayans from the Wayans, the huge Wayans brothers and sisters family that now has generations of wealth. I don't care, how you grew up, to be honest, at this point, because you have been out of poverty for quite some time, and so have generations after you. He's 50 years old, and he's the youngest of the most well-known in the Wayans family. So you went back and you fixed up their gym. Okay, so that might have been cool back in the day. You fixed up the gym for the kids. They got someplace to go after school. Okay, but you can do more. This is what I mean. Times have changed. People and places have been so neglected at this point that the old things from the past just aren't going to be good enough. That's just the way it is. And so in juxtaposition to that, another thing that I recently saw, well, probably this might have been like 6 months to a year ago, before all the problems with crypto, Jay-Z, another well-known person, he also grew up in projects, and he went back. He grew up in Marcy Projects in Brooklyn. He went back to Marcy and gave everyone in Marcy Projects Bitcoin. He also has a partnership with Long Island University, and in addition to that, gave those people access to learn about Bitcoin at Long Island University. Okay, so to me, you can see the big difference in those two approaches. And Jay-Z's approach to me is more treating the problem rather than the symptom, treating the problem of poverty in an attempt to make a difference rather than the symptom of a child needing to be able to go play in the gym in the projects that they live in. Not that that's not important, like the same with the word James, what I'm saying, not that what she has done is not important, but in changing times, approaches need to change also. And, the Wayans brothers family, come on, like, you could build 1,000 gyms. Okay, or 1,000,000. Okay. so Jay-Z's approach is a little better in my opinion, but that's not to say that I totally agree with what also was in the news just yesterday, that he and Beyonce bought a house for $200 million. That's probably for another episode because we can go down a whole rabbit hole with this. $200 million, Beyonce getting $60 million to perform for 1 hour. Well, no wonder, they can afford to buy a $200 million home. Sorry, Beehive, but $60 million for an hour. There are many people, many creative people in this world, who can do something similar. And people who have an overabundance of wealth and privilege, in my opinion, do not deserve to have it any more than anyone else. So last lastly, just on that note, there's another thing I want to mention. I'm starting the use of a hashtag, which is called hashtag madebyustoo. Because in that same vein of talking about people who are creative, there are many people who are creative, and there are a lot of independent content creators out there. So use the hashtag madebyustoo, and then make an attempt to consume only that content. And if you redirect your attention, you will ultimately redirect the wealth instead of continuing to put money in pockets of people who already have it. So that hashtag will be tagged on this episode and all the episodes of this podcast if you need to see it for a reference. And then I'll keep using it as a reminder in order to tell people, in order to help people or encourage people to use it. Finally, just to kind of like put a button on all this, these issues that are not new issues, as I was saying. Things have changed, and we need to approach things differently. Although the problems are old, they are changing and growing. And so here, speaking to that fact, this was years ago, is the late rapper named Tupac. And he was a multi-dimensional person, as all of us are, who had thoughts and opinions about many different things.
You know, if I know that in this hotel room they have food every day, and I'm knocking on the door every day to eat, and they open the door, let me see the party, let me see like them throwing salami all over just like throwing food around, but they're telling me there's no food in here. You know what I'm saying? Every day, I'm standing outside trying to sing my way in. You know what I'm saying? We are hungry, please let us in. We are hungry, please let us in. After about a week, that song is going to change to we hungry, we need some food. After 2-3 weeks, it's like, give me the food, ragging on the door. And after a year, then you just like, you know what I'm saying? I'm picking the lock, coming through the door, blasting, you know what I'm saying? It's like you hungry, you reached your level, you don't want any more. We asked 10 years ago.
He also had this to say.
I'm about to change it. But I know if I keep talking about how dirty it is out here, somebody gonna clean it up.
And on that note, I just want to remind people that you want to be aware that the problems of inequity still exist. On that note, there are 3 things that I always want you to remember. And the first one is you have exactly the same value as everyone else on this planet. Number 2, don't hate, participate, because it takes a village to do most things. And if we all get together, work together, we will get to where we want to be. Number 3, and most importantly, the key to solving inequity is not begging people to see you as equal. That makes no sense. It is reminding others that they are not more than equal. So once again, thank you for listening. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you'll know when we drop a new